just off stage at the Key Club, and time to meet a rather fabulous character. Cosmopolitan, experienced, showman, musician, raconteur, bon vivant, Billy Eckstine.
Well, that's a whole lot of handles there you put on me, Lane. I hope I can hold up to them.
I'm sure you can. You know, if I mention just several things offhand, I'd like to get some reactions, and first name I'd like to mention would be, say, Earl Father Hines. What would you say?
Well, I'd have to say that there's the guy that's responsible for any success that I've ever had. This guy showed me how to walk out on the stage. It got to that point. The only thing Earl didn't give me was a voice, and that's my mother and dad I have to thank for, but the actual projection of it and the arts of salesmanship and things like that, I can credit all to him.
Here's a man who seems to have such a fine, sincere sense of showmanship that it's a rare thing to find these days.
Probably the greatest showman that we've ever known has been, at least I can say so, because I worked with him for a long time, and I know the man. The man is a fabulous showman. I know there's a very few people that can touch him. He's really proven to me that he's a fabulous showman.
What specifically do you remember about your first meetings with Earl Father Hines and some of those first sessions on the band that he had?
Well, right offhand, it's a little hard to say, Lane, but there was just so many things that went by unheralded that he was so great at, as far as teaching. And what you would learn from Earl, me who always tried to be a showman, was just to watch him. You could learn more from watching him than you could from what he would tell you, you know.
What do you think you learned from Earl Father Hines?
Well, projection, showmanship to a certain degree, the actual trying of feeling of seeing what an audience wants, of which he was a past master at. He was a master at knowing what the people wanted to hear.
This more or less formed your opinions and ideas for leading a band?
Oh, yes, definitely. I used to watch him as a conductor, watch him as a band leader, and he had everything. There was nothing he was short on. And then as a musician, I don't think he could be touched, because even to this day, I don't think anybody sells a piano any greater than Earl. They may play more modern now, but I mean, as far as putting him on, and then you can pick anybody else and put behind him, I think they have a tough road to follow him as far as the public is concerned.
Well, now about another band. I remember the great Mr. B's band, and I remember particularly names like, well, Charlie Parker. Let's start with him.
Well, my band, I had Charlie. In fact, my band now has long since been extinct, but I can truthfully say that I had possibly the best big band collectively for modern jazz that's ever been assembled. I can say it now because I don't have them, and it doesn't sound like egotism. But nevertheless, I don't think there's been any 20 or 22-piece band collectively that played as good as modern jazz as we did. But we happened to come up in a little bit of the wrong time, a little bit too early. And the usages of chords and such of the modern chords was a little bit too strange for people's ears at the moment. But now, if the band was assembled, I think it would be a very big money-making sensation. But of course, now to try to assemble those same guys who were with me would be an impossibility, because Charlie Parker has died since then, Fats Navarro is dead, and Shadow Wilson is dead, and the other guys are big stars now who are out on their own.
Which moves the budget up on the band to a...
Oh yeah, you couldn't assemble.
Extent.
You couldn't even assemble that band now. Miles Davis and all of the young progressive musicians were in the band at some time or another. Well, and then we had a pretty good girl vocalist too, Sarah Vaughan.
Yes. You know, in
whatever happened to her?
Oh, yes, what did? Let's see, I think that blue chip stock is converted on Wall Street and split 3 times. And it's the Vaughan Corporation. But one thing I did, in passing, you mentioned Fats Navarro, who was Probably one of the fine young trumpet
Well,
players who never reached maturity like Clifford Brown.
That's right, that's right.
And when I think of Fats Navarro, well, maybe you'd like to make just a quick note on him because he is so fabulous a part of the transitional terms.
Well, Fats, the first time I heard Fats, he was playing with Andy Kirk's band, and he had no solos whatsoever in the band because it was mainly a dance band, and they did mostly vocals and things of that such, if you remember the old Andy Kirk band.
I certainly do, with Mary Lou.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Dizzy was getting ready to leave my band to start his own band. So we were looking around for somebody to take the solo book, and it was strictly on modern jazz and very modern usages of everything, and we had to have somebody who wouldn't be a letdown behind Dizzy, which is a pretty tough job to follow. So we were working in Washington, D.C. at the Club Bally, and Andy Kirk was working at another spot in Washington called the Louisiana Club. And some guys had told me about Fats, and they said, "B, why don't you go out there and hear him, you know?" So I went out, and I listened to him a whole evening, and he didn't play any solos. And then on the last show, behind the chorus girls, I heard this guy starting taking solos behind these girls dancing out there, and I said, "Oh yeah, he's the boy." So I talked to Fats, and he joined the band after 2 weeks after Dizzy's notice was up, and Fats came in Dizzy's book and was as great as Dizzy is, and I'll never change it any kind of way. I think Dizzy is possibly the greatest all-around trumpet player in the business today, but there was no letdown when Fats came in. There was none whatsoever, because he had a different approach to the style that we were playing that fitted the band perfectly.
B, let's talk about you personally for just a moment. Naturally, you've been influenced by certain things in music which have contributed to you, and perhaps you might just evaluate one or two of those influences. Where does the actual instrumental influence come in? Is it reeds or brass or both that influence your singing?
I think music as a whole influenced my singing. I like saxophones and I like brass instruments, though I play brass instruments myself. I picked up trumpet more or less because I had no formal training in music whatsoever. And when I got with Earl Hines' band, I was tired of just going strictly on my ear alone. And a wonderful buddy of mine, who was my roommate for about 5 years with Earl Hines, Bud Johnson, who was a great saxophone, a great tenor man. He was my roommate and he did all of the arranging for Earl, and he was also the straw boss, as we call them. You know, rehearsed the band and did everything. Yeah. And well, I learned music from question and answer and heckle system. You know.
You might explain that a little bit as far as your terminology.
Well, I'd ask him. Well, look, how do you find the relative minor to this? Maybe he was writing an arrangement. He'd say, "I'll tell you in a minute," you know, and he keeps going. And I said, "Come on, man, tell me how you do this." He said, "Geez, will you wait a minute? I'm trying to figure this thing. You count 6 notes from the tonic, you know, and things like that," as more or less a heckling end of it. But nevertheless, I retained it and learned. And through Bud, I found out those things, the different ways to form chords and things strictly like that. And he and I, in the daytimes when he wasn't writing, we would sit around and he gave me a, I'll never forget, he gave me a blank manuscript notebook once, and he said, "Look, you keep asking questions, why don't you work it out theoretically, and you can see why, when I tell you to count the relative minor to 6 tones, you can see why it happens like that if you work it out on your ledger lines of your musical chart." So I started fooling around and listening to him and Jerry Valentine, who was also in the band at the time. And I picked up a lot just and retained it that way. But to this day, I haven't had any formal training whatsoever, other than learning instruments with... I studied trumpet and trombone under Maurice Grupp in New York. The breathing... well, he's practically every one of the great musicians during the jazz era you know, during what we call the swing era with Basie and Benny Goodman and Lunsford and that type. Well, that era, they studied with Grupp. Tommy Dorsey studied with him. Artie Shaw. He was a breathing. He taught breathing, diaphragm breathing.
What sort of cue would you give to anyone who might be listening in regarding this business of breathing, maybe a la Grupp or your own experience?
Well, I think breathing is your secret to
all things in
show business. Yeah, if you're a singer, you have to breathe correctly. I've tried to apply in singing the same thing that I would in talking. Like, you wouldn't say, I think I'll go downtown and take a drink, or, you know, you'd say, I think I'll go downtown and take a drink. You'd say it all on one breath. By the same token, you wouldn't do that in singing. You wouldn't say, I want to go and see, you know, like that. You'd say it all in one breath. So singing is applicable to talking. You sing in the same conversational end that you do in talking. You look at a song and you see what the writer has tried to say, and whether it's a story. So you try to tell that story and give the best type of a message that you can with that story and phrasing. Why, the great surge of Sinatra, I mean, everybody loves Frank. I do too. I'm one of his staunch rooters. Is because Frank is such a great phraser, and he learned it from Tommy Dorsey. So did Joe Stafford and them. Tommy was probably,
as a matter of fact, yeah.
Yeah, Tommy was practically the greatest. I'd say he was the greatest all-around phraser and breather that has ever been known on an instrument.
And if anybody had the privilege of working with his band...
Yeah, well, they all learned it from there. Dick Haymes, you take any of your singers that breathe good, they all learned it from Tommy. And Tommy had a little thing he used to practice. He used to take a glass of water, and he'd fill it halfway full. And then he'd take a soda straw and put in the soda straw. One night we were pretty loaded, and I was asking him about this. I said, how do you get this feeling like that? And he told me this. He said, this sounds silly. He said, but try it. So he put a soda straw in a half a glass of water. He said, now you think of the song that you're going to sing. Don't hum it, but think of it. Take a deep breath, hold it, and think of that song as you're singing it, and try to make the bubbles, blow into that straw, but try to make the bubbles be very even. Don't let them go fast, slow, and erratic. Keep them even, yeah, as you think that you're singing the song. And he said, the only pressure that you need to make a note come out of your voice, the only resistance you'll get is no more in comparison than you would to half a glass of water. That resistance of pushing that water to make that bubble. And I used to practice it all the time, and it's a fabulous thing, but it works.
Have to try that one. B, you know, you speak of songs and you speak of phrasing and ideas. There's a great contrast today in the kind of music we're getting. We hope that the 60s will dawn with some fine new inspirational outlets for creative people like yourself and many, many others. When you consider songs, getting down to the specifics here, of new composers and material that you search for, what do you look for in a song?
I look for, Lane, I look mainly for a perfect marriage between a lyric, the words, and the music.
Have you got an example of that?
Well, frankly, of the modern music, no, because, geez, now all you have is splish splash, I was taking a bath, and some crap like that, you know.
Sure.
You know, you can't.
Or, as a matter of fact, you know, a couple of hiccup singers trying to make it.
Yeah, you know, the four nosebleeds and
4 haircuts.
Yeah, but the main thing is when the guy wrote a song, you'd hear a beautiful melody, then you would hear a beautiful lyric that would sort of enhance what was happening on that particular song. Like Rodgers and Hammerstein, a perfect coupling. Don Ray, Gene DePaul.
Who written some beautiful things.
Yeah, well, these guys, they write melodically, and they write sensible lyrics, you know. Well, that's what I look for in a song. I think any singer who is trained at all, or anybody who's had any training in music, or been around where good things have been done, They can't understand. That's why they put up this wall for rock and roll. They say this is terrible music, which I don't say it's terrible music. I think it's a good thing for the kids the kids like it. But I couldn't do it myself, you know. I mean,
You weren't trained that way.
No, I can't.
Don't you think, in a way, although you know rock and roll is a very democratic kind of music in this sense of the word, you consider that amateurs as well as professionals can go in and perform this way, and it has a kind of a universal appeal in that way. It's
That's
sort of
right.
like folk music in that respect.
And all the chord progressions are the same on all of these songs, if you ever notice. They all go the same way.
It's somewhat like some standard forms of the blues.
That's right. It's always the same. A standard form of the blues with a channel to it is all it is.